Friends, it's been a while, wasn't it? Tonight I'm reporting back with the biggest model I've built so far. So big, my workbench can't even handle the box. The Karl Mortar is probably my first dream model from way back when I was a 12-year-old wee lad playing Blitzkrieg on PC. Fun fact, I almost finished one when I was about 16, but this was the terrible kit from Dragon and I never got further beyond this partially pinwash stage, and eventually it ended up in the trash bin. That's a good thing though, because the Trumpeter kit is infinitely more detailed and extremely accurate, and this revised packaging comes with some neat extras. For example, aluminum shells, 8 crew figures, both types of the lower hull with positionable suspension, and also 60cm or 54cm mortar barrels. Understandably, I snatched some rudimentary aftermarket blink, aka metal tracks from Master Club, and some basic photo etch from Edward. And here comes the good stuff. You know it's a premium kit when there are additional boxes inside the box, and here we find the beautiful light and heavy concrete piercing shells and some basic photo etch. The plastic crew figures look alright considering it's a 2003 Trumpeter release, but I'd still rather go with a couple of resin crewmen. I mean, we'll see later on the road. The rubber tracks are quite horrible, so the metal ones were almost a necessity. Oh, and did I mention the decals, which include markings for pretty much every Karl Mortar ever. Basically, this is the ultimate kit for this monstrosity, at least so far. I also appreciate the booklet-style instructions, and we can happily skip the first few pages if we're not gonna build the early chassis, which in my humble opinion is plain ugly. But you gotta admit, 2 hulls are nothing special, but it feels very premium if they're these huge slabs of plastic, right? Anyway, let's start building, and what's a better way to kick off an epic build than assembling 5 billion road wheels? It was about time I tried a more sophisticated method than manually scraping and sanding the sprue gates and seam lines. In other words, my modeling has officially become mechanized. A modeling rotary tool is quite alright, but the jaw is very small and the RPM too big, and as such, an AC drill is way more suitable for the job. I bought this budget drill from Parkside for assembling IKEA furniture, and now it's gonna become a viable modeling tool. As you figured out, there are 2 million wheels on this model, so I decided to glue the return rollers firmly in place. The amount of detail on this clockwork sprocket is astonishing, and it's gone. I have a slight suspicion that the sprockets are pushed too far outside, but we'll be smarter once we have the tracks assembled. It's actually easier to glue the road wheels together and then give them the mechanized treatment. However, it's better to work patiently because you can easily remove way too much material, accidentally creating wheels of different sizes. Now, the Karl Mortar has a suspension that can be raised or lowered for transport and for firing. Naturally, I'm building it in the firing position, where the hull is sitting right on its belly. A lot of wheels means a lot of trouble with their alignment, and to do it properly, I used a piece of track and pressed them firmly against my workbench while the glue was still soft. This way, they'll all sit perfectly on the ground. And, as I suspected, the sprockets are pushed too outward, but it's an easy fix. Just remove a bit of plastic and everything should be good. See? Perfect. By the way, despite the enormous research that must have gone into this kit, Trumpeter made a huge mistake in the instructions. Karl Mortar sitting on its belly is definitely not in traveling mode. If you don't believe me, check like every historical photo in existence. Moving on, the tracks from Master Club are very easy to assemble. On one hand, the links are very long, so the track grows on your workbench rather quickly, but on the other, it's a long hull, and thus you need a lot of track. I'm guessing each track is more than half a meter long on this model. I was just a little bit surprised that the resin pins weren't more detailed, but I guess it's okay. Way better than the twisted and distorted rubber tracks, that's for sure. With the lower hull out of the way, let's now do some proper modeling on the upper sections. I was originally blown away by the amount of detail and accuracy when I compared the kit to those, about 190 walk-around photos from the Kubinka Tank Museum, but I quickly noticed the lack of engineering fineness. Then again, it's an 18-year-old kit, and we're talking about one of the early Trumpeter releases, so the engineering is bound to be quite rough. Basically, every part contains some kind of flaw, be it a very visible seam line, a good amount of flash, or ejector pin marks, both round and rectangular. This means tons of filling, scraping, sanding, and removing any excess material. As some people would put it, basic modeling skills. Also, I was quite happy that I could add my favorite rough steel texture to quite a lot of parts. The Karl Mortar also features a good amount of weld beads, but roughly half of them can be added directly into the plastic by chopping the edges with a hobby blade and softening the result with liquid cement. I mean, it's not the most realistic representation of corner weld beads, but it's quite easy and gets the job done. Also, I needed to glue the hull together as quickly as possible so I could fill any resulting gaps. Again, it's because the hull is held together with corner welds and I wouldn't be able to add those otherwise. And once again, I must applaud Trumpeter for their extensive research on this vehicle, because they even included these odd weld lines on the front plate. But as always, these can be improved. So I mixed my new favorite mixture of Tamiya epoxy putty QuickType and green stuff putty in equal amounts and rolled them into thin noodles. Most of the missing weld beads are located on the hull. The rest is pretty much held together with rivets and oversized bolts. But let me tell you, welding such a long hull is not a quick job. On the other hand, I think it's gonna be completely worth the effort because it gives the model that proper heavy metal look. And this model is definitely meant to look heavy. I was also able to add the missing welds to these supporting structures. Just some careful study of photographic evidence, a bit of scribing and scraping, and you'll end up with a nice detail that's gonna enhance the model. Here's another great example of this rough engineering. There were a lot of deep ejector pin marks on this model, so to spare my sanity, I used a mixture of black superglue and VMS CA filler. You can quickly and precisely fill the pin marks without making a huge mess, and unlike regular modeling putty, superglue doesn't shrink when it dries. Once I had every part filled, I blasted everything with the CA activator from Ammo. Thanks to this potion, the glue becomes rock hard in an instant, and you can proceed with sanding until the parts are perfectly clean. If you need some of these magical concoctions from VMS, you can snatch them at mishtoy.com, and if you're a registered user and use the promo code FRIENDS2023, you'll get a whopping 15% discount on everything. Now I could merely stipple some diluted Tamiya putty over these hooks, giving them a realistic cast steel texture and also getting rid of any minor imperfections along the way. The result is pretty much perfect, just like on the real vehicle. Some other basic modeling is involved in these wooden planks. I didn't find any photographic evidence of them, so I'm just gonna believe Trumpeter here. The Eduard photo edge tries to replace these with metal plates, but wood is more attractive, at least when it comes to painting and chipping. Now that I mentioned the Eduard detail set, it's mostly useful for tool clamps. In fact, the engineering tools in this kit are not the best looking, but I was able to find enough spare parts from other kits to replace them. Also, Eduard clamps are very simplified compared to Voyager or Aber, but I find them perfectly sufficient for the job. Yeah, I mean, the difference is probably visible here, right? Just a little. But yeah, it all looks pretty sharp with the photo edge, steel texture and weld beads. And in fact, that's basically the entire hull out of the way. And I thought the biggest workload was behind me, but I was so much mistaken. Because next up is the giant 60cm mortar. The most amazing feature is the bore that comes as a separate piece. I remember trying to fill and sand the dragon barrel on the inside, and spoiler, it was not fun. Here I only sharpened the end of the barrel with the triangle file to make the rifling look cleaner. It's honestly interesting when you compare a tube like this to a regular tiny tank barrel. I wanted to make sure it looked absolutely pristine, so I gave it a quick blast of Mr. Oxide primer, and once it was completely dry, I spotted a few imperfections. That obviously had to be carefully filled and sanded. In fact, the most difficult part about the mortar is how the entire body is made from halves, walls and small pieces, while in reality most of these are just massive blocks of cast steel. So, as you would expect, there's quite a lot of filling and sanding involved. However, it's all worth the effort because the steel texture on these parts is exceptionally rough. It almost looks like it was modeled by hand from half-dried concrete or something. To achieve this proper texture, I stippled various intensities of Tamiya putty in multiple layers, starting with putty diluted with Mr. Cement S and finishing with thick putty straight from the tube. Another fun fact, this model consumed an entire bottle of Mr. Cement S and half a tube of Tamiya putty. And then, of course, I gently polished the surface with a micro sanding sponge. Another cool feature, the mortar can be dry assembled just like the real thing. The main body, the recoil housing and the breech. And one more interesting detail is that most of the barrel is hidden inside this sleeve. And, as you probably guessed, this part is also cast as one piece with the main body. And as if there weren't enough cool touches, the recoil mechanism actually works, thanks to 4 metal springs inside. Okay, but why was I mistaken when I thought the hull was where most of the workload was located? Well, because this model is basically like building several small 1/35 scale models. The hull is one huge model, the mortar is another, and the cradle is a whole new beast all in itself. A lot of the seam lines have to be brutally sanded because gentle scraping won't cut it. It is a great exercise in filling. This part is a single casting in real life, but is made from several pieces in the kit. There are also quite a few awkward rectangular pin marks that need to be filled, but most of this would be pretty ordinary, right? No problem for a regular modeler. But dealing with these tight spaces, that's a whole new level of awkwardness. Luckily, I was able to get away with pretty brutal scraping using a fresh hobby blade. The surface definitely wasn't smooth after this treatment, but luckily for me, the entire part has a very rough texture. Again, this is why I love building armor models, because you can always count on steel textures to brighten up your day. More awkward filling was required on the riveted part of the cradle. Here I didn't see any other solution than removing the rivets and marking out their position, because I would destroy them one way or the other. Luckily, there's an easy fix. You can punch out new rivets from tinfoil using the opposite end of a drill bit. Here I used the 1mm diameter, and the best part, it's extremely fast and doesn't cost you anything. Another piece of awesomeness is the fact you can glue them in place using modeling cement. It'll soften the plastic and the metal rivet will slightly sink into the surface. It's super clean, you have time to position them properly, and you don't need to mess around with super glue. I mean, sure, they're a little flat compared to the OG rivets, but they're easy to make and that outweighs all the negatives. Now, let's briefly talk about photo etch. Every piece can be bent using a pair of tweezers, and most of the useful stuff can be actually found directly in the kit. Seriously, Edward is being Edward here, just, trying to replace things that look better in plastic. The only useful pieces from them are the tool clamps, as I mentioned, some small chains, which are not the prettiest, but and these tiny steps. Again, they look just fine in plastic, but hey, if you can, why not add a bit of bling to our model? Anyway, at this point I was almost finished, but the inside of the hull was missing a few details. Most of them won't be visible anyway, but I already knew about them, so, why not spend a bit of extra time for that off chance that someone, sometime, will actually look inside the hull, right? of course. But I also did it because I had to hide those visible and pretty much impossible to fill gaps between the lower hull and upper hull. Thankfully, there's some kind of internal structure on the real thing, and I just added a few additional beams to hide those flaws. As I said, nothing fancy, and I'm still missing a few parts, but I think it's more than enough considering how little of this area is gonna be visible. So here we have it, my friends, the biggest model I've built, at least so far. It's also the longest time I spent building a model since I started making these videos, and it was almost 4 full weeks in total. And most of this time was spent removing seam lines and filling gaps. Yeah, a bit of basic modeling, I guess, and a bit of nostalgia if you ask me, because models these days, they fit together like a set of Lego blocks. However, I'm still blown away by how detailed and accurate this model is, considering it's one of the oldest Trumpeter kits, especially when we compare it to its counterpart from Dragon. But then again, Dragon pretty much dropped the ball with their Karl Mortar, so I guess the competition wasn't very tight to begin with. And unlike the Dragon kit, which I didn't finish as a teenager, this one I better start painting. I just hope my tiny compressor won't explode during these prolonged spraying sessions ahead of me. One thing is for sure, good times ahead with all those fumes. Anyway, the build was initially fun, and then it turned into a sort of chore with all those, cleanups on every tiny part. But I think painting and weathering will be something else. Especially the post-shading potential with all those complex shapes and tons of surface details. So make sure to watch the next video if you're curious about the result as well. In the meantime, I wanna say thank you for watching, my friends, and Happy New Year! A special thanks goes to my wonderful patrons who make this show possible. If you like what I'm doing, wanna get more of it, and in return support my work, you can go to my Patreon page and see what kind of reward would you like. I'm posting there almost every day with updates from my workbench. We can get in touch through DMs, comments and emails. I'm posting 1 week early ad-free videos. I also have some small 3D models for detailing your projects, a bunch of references from the real world if you need inspiration for old buildings, landscapes, dioramas and so on, and these beautiful studio photos which you can download in full resolution. Alright, dear friends, there's one more thing I didn't tell you yet, but I think it's gonna be better if I talk about it properly, and a small mention at the end of the video isn't exactly that. So I guess I'll make a community post, or maybe a dedicated short video. But for now, I'm gonna start painting, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers!